Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin, Schall, Alex Wolfe. We are back together to go at Seth Partnow of The Athletic. They put out their annual tiers ranking. Jalen Brunson is too damn low, Alex, and so is Julius Randle. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat that Alex is currently wearing. With any purchase, you won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. And we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. And if you take advantage of enjoying us on all platforms, well, that would make you an everydayer and therefore one of my best friends. If you want to become an everydayer, all you have to do is be sure to subscribe on YouTube, hit that notifications bell to be especially sure that you'll never miss an episode, and do the same on the audio side. But let's just say you're a real freak and that's not enough for you. Well, there's more. You can subscribe on Subtext, where we will text you our Knicks takes, not even on the daily, probably every couple of hours, the way we think about this team. You'll get our initial thoughts after games, after trades, after free agency signings, the latest rumors, reports, all that good stuff. And you can reach out with questions whenever you want. But who would you be talking to? I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And my partner in crime is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland the Greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. I've been on vacation. Alex was on vacation before that, so we haven't had a chance to catch up in a while. But Alex, now we get a chance to do what we do best: get angry at someone with a higher paying job than us. Seth Partnow at The Athletic put out his annual player rankings. We can just run through this real quick. Jalen Brunson was, so tier 1 is the highest, tier 5 is the lowest. Jalen Brunson was tier 3. He was, by my count, because they did not put numbers on this, the 38th ranked player in the NBA. Julius Randle was tier 4. He was the 62nd ranked player in the NBA. And then tomorrow we'll get into Emmanuel quickly, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, who were also all ranked in tier 5. But Alex, we start with Jalen Brunson, number 38. Not horrific on the surface, but then you see some of the guys ahead of him and your stomach starts to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe this just comes across as us being like jaded Knicks fans or whatever, but not only is he in tier 3, but these were all split into like A and B of any given tier, right? So like, for example, Giannis, Steph Curry, Jokic were tier 1A, whereas Durant, Doncic, and Embiid are tier 1B. So they're all tier 1, but still, even in the tiers, they're split into A's and B's. And that meant that our Jalen Brunson wound up in tier 3B out of a possible 3C that he could have been in. Notably, I've been seeing this debate raging recently. At least we got one injustice cured in that he was ranked above Tyrese Halliburton, but notably ranked behind some other players that maybe raise your eyebrows a little bit. Gavin, I think I mean, there's a case that could be made. You said this, possibly Kawhi Leonard, who was super high on this list. You could possibly say, just based off availability and everything else, that he should possibly be above him. Paul George, again, availability based. You got to be on the court to be able to win games. But then Bam Adebayo, Donovan Mitchell, whose soul he has stolen 2 years in a row in the playoffs. Jaren Jackson Jr., who's, a fantastic player, but ultimately not one of the most valuable archetypes in the NBA. De'Aaron Fox, which you just had a great debate about. Trae Young, who I would say he is much better than. Kyrie Irving, again, who can like barely stay on the floor and hasn't impacted winning in years. Chris Middleton, barely stay on the floor. I mean, the list goes on. Draymond Green, Pascal Siakam, Zion Williamson, who also can't stay on the floor. Lots of guys ahead of Jalen Brunson. I don't know, as usual, and maybe this is just us being jaded, grumpy Knicks fans, feels a little disrespectful.
Yeah, so I grouped them, you were kind of getting into it, but into 3 different categories. Players who definitely shouldn't be ahead of Jalen Brunson. Let's start there. So that tier, I had Pascal, Draymond, maybe. I'm going to move Draymond to possibly should be ahead. Because
I think leave him indefinitely. Right. What is Draymond Green? What is Draymond Green in?
I think he still might be the best defender in the NBA. So that is where the case lives and dies. He is a black hole offensively. Nothing doing there. Obviously, the off the court stuff. Like you could argue he single-handedly tanked the Warriors season last year. He is still an extraordinary defensive basketball player. So that's where I stop with Draymond. Pascal Siakam. Regular season, I would hear the argument. He had a pretty similar regular season to Jalen Brunson. His team did not make the playoffs, and they were like expected to. They were expected to be better than the Knicks. The roster was built pretty poorly in terms of fit. So I guess I would hear that argument out. And I guess Pascal, again, maybe would be inching towards the next category. But again, like best player on the team didn't make the playoffs versus Jalen Brunson, who's pushing the eventual Eastern Conference champions Miami Heat to the brink, essentially single-handedly. I just don't see the comparison there. Chris Middleton is so clearly on the decline and doesn't really seem, I mean, you said he could like barely stay on the court. Even when he's on the court, looked like a shell of himself. Kyrie is actively counterproductive, had one team who wanted him this year or he would have gone somewhere else. And then James Harden, Alex, I'll let you take the floor on this. Did us and Seth not watch the same NBA playoffs this year where Harden had two incredible games, much like the three incredible games Jalen Brunson had to nearly get to Game 7 against Miami? But then in all the other games, Jalen Brunson was still pretty good, while James Harden looked like he shouldn't be in the NBA anymore. Like that one was stunning to me, and Harden was about 13 spots ahead of him.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting criteria with this list. You know, like we were talking about it before the show about what went into this, and it was, allegedly based off a number of advanced metrics that, were used to kind of paint this picture, which, Seth Partnow is a big advanced metrics guy. But then there was also notes about, well, contracts are considered in this thing. And, playoff success is considered in this thing. And all these other various little factors. And all those things would seem to favor Jalen Brunson. So it's a little weird to see him behind guys that are making like $40-50 million when Jalen Brunson's making 26. And is outperforming them and was in the playoffs, performed at the highest level in the playoffs. You could argue had maybe one of the top 6 or 7 individual player playoffs in the entire NBA this year, as far as what he was bringing every single night. The fact that he was going out there and basically getting 30 whenever he wanted to and propelling his team to a second round exit to the eventual Eastern Conference champions in 6 games. I mean, especially considering the injuries and everything else that the Knicks went through as a team, it feels kind of disrespectful. I'll also say too, and this is going to come up in the next end of the next segment in the third segment when we talk about Julius Randle, but it's crazy to see a guy like Pascal Siakam ranked that high, putting up basically the same numbers that Julius Randle does, if not even slightly worse, depending on what you're looking at, and on a much worse team that underperformed and didn't even make the playoffs. Like, it's kind of funny that it seems like on this list, it's like playoff success counts if it's convenient. But not making the playoffs is no big deal.
Yeah, Alex. I mean, Pascal's getting rewarded for not having an opportunity to be exposed. It's like when you hear people talk about LeBron's finals record, he got to the finals. That's better than losing in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's better to make the playoffs than to lose in the than to not be in the playoffs. And we'll get into it for a sec. But I mean, this ranking, when it talks about Julius's playoff run, which sure we've been guilty of in the past too, like just totally ignores the fact that the guy was hurt. But maybe we'll get into that down the road.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But I mean, there's just, it seems like there's a lot of, I don't know, like double standards. Like what?
So he emphasizes that the core of this is how much are these guys contributing to 2024 championship equity, which again, we could continue to talk about in just a sec. But Jalen Brunson, like I'll double check right now. He's the youngest guy of those 5 who I just noted definitely shouldn't be ahead of him. Mm-hmm. And I think that should be taken into account when you're talking about future production, not past production.
And even just for this coming season, I mean, the season that Brunson just had is like a 25 point per game guy, 25 points, 6 assists, like amazing efficiency. I mean, there's literally not a single thing. Julius, when we get to him in a second, obviously there's a few things that you could knock him for if you want to be like, oh, well, he doesn't space the floor good enough, or, not every metric like loves him or whatever. But Brunson, it's like, what could you possibly look at with Brunson? A guy that shot like 42% on volume, and like many of them self-created threes last year, and be like, this guy doesn't contribute as much to a championship team this year as like Pascal Siakam. Like, Nah. Just like miss me with that, dude. And even miss me with like Trae Young. Again, a bunch of guys on here who were like the number one options on their teams and didn't even make the playoffs last year, or like lightly made the playoffs. Like the Hawks. Okay, yeah, they made it, but did they really? Like, come on, what did they do? You know, or like you look at like, I don't know. I mean, Zion Williamson didn't make the playoffs, barely even stayed on the floor. It's like
he didn't make the NBA this year.
Didn't make the NBA. Yeah, I mean, he just didn't do anything. So I don't know. We can continue this discussion in just a second. I do want to quickly let everybody know about one of our favorite sponsors, though. As you noted, I am wearing the hat right now. I'm full in on Bird Dogs.
I'm joining you in that, Alex.
Oh, good. Now we're both rocking the hats because I love Bird Dogs. They're not just hats. The hat is just the free gift. Bird Dogs are shorts, pants, joggers, and they make you look real good. They have stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. I'll tell you what, it's been making leg day feel like an extra pays off for me. It's always nice to look in the mirror and be like, you know what? These shorts really fit me. Got a nice inseam. They fit real good. They're so comfy. They have an inner liner, which is sick. So like during this time of year where it's really warm outside, you don't have to worry about like potential butt sweat situation. I've run into that plenty of times in my life. It's not fun if you're out and it's like really, really hot outside. So they've got an inner liner, but you can also get it without the liner if you prefer not to. I don't know why you would, because the liner is awesome. And the shorts themselves are stretchy. They're like 4-way stretch, so you can wear them pretty much any scenario you would wear gym shorts, even though they look like khaki shorts. And so if you're at a barbecue somewhere and Labor Day's coming up and a volleyball game breaks out or something, you don't feel self-conscious about wearing your nice khaki shorts or whatever to go play some volleyball. You could just like hop right in there, be ready to freaking rock. So if you want to get some Bird Dog shorts for yourself and this sick hat, like what we have on right now, it's nice and white. It's got like a little like pink bird on it. It's pretty cool. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA and enter promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, or just enter promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take the Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. All right, Gavin, we're back in, going through this atrocious, disgraceful athletic ranking of Jalen Brunson, and then in a moment Julius Randle. But yeah, I feel like we ranted and raved quite a bit about Brunson not being higher. I mean, I like, how much do you think that the contract? This is the thing that keeps coming back to me. How much do you think the contract stuff really played into this ranking? Because I feel like it's not acknowledged enough that Brunson and Randle combined make less money than most of the top guys on these lists. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, the guys making their supermax contracts, making like $50 million a year, that is literally what the Knicks' top two players make combined. And there's a real annoying money quote in the Julius Randle part that I'm going to get. I'll just read it now because this applies to both.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So at the end of Partnow's ranking of Julius Randle, he said, but building with or around such players is difficult, meaning Julius Randle, both because of the need to move away from their preferred style once the playoffs start, and more importantly, because players of this nature get paid handsomely for that regular season accumulation, basically saying that Randle is only a regular season player, not a postseason player. And he says it's simply not realistic to expect to be able to afford a championship roster, knowing that a near max making regular season workhorse is going to have to take a much smaller role if a team has designs on deep playoff runs. Now, again, this is like, I feel like the goalposts get moved on these lists all the time, where they'll say, and ESPN does this every year too, where they always go, this ranking is just, because we do these every single year, this ranking is just for this coming year. That's it. Like, we're just talking about in 2023-24, where do these guys rank in the NBA as it currently stands? And then they list all these factors. And yet then you'll have a sentence like that where it goes, Seth Partnow, you're a former front office guy. Like, are you not aware of what a max contract is at this point in the NBA? Because Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson for the next 2 seasons are not going to be max players, which it's just conveniently skirted over here. They're not even going to be close to max players, which is going to
Jalen Brown makes.
Yeah. Oh, Jalen Brown is going to make like $70 million by the time all said and done. And these guys are going to be sitting here making 25 million each.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I feel like that's so, it's crazy that it's not even acknowledged that like literally like their own teammate, RJ Barrett, is going to make more than like both of them in the next year. Like this coming season, he will be making more than both of them. And I don't think that is appreciated enough with these things.
Yeah. I mean, so here's what Seth says about it. The tiers are largely contract agnostic, especially considering that contention level teams are less beholden to value for contract than building teams, as they already have the guys in the building, and the CBA almost requires teams to pay / overpay to retain their top players. This exercise is meant to focus much more on players' on-court production relative to other players rather than contract. Contract status does factor in slightly when dealing with certain team building realities around low-level stars. Jeremy Grant is one of the better examples that right now in a contender level team, he'd be much more effective. I think something akin to his role on the Nuggets in 2019-20, his primary blah, 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 blah. So essentially saying like, that's not a big factor for him. So take that for what it's worth, but I almost,
but
like,
why bring it up then?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just don't see how you can do that, because like your value as a player is also, it's inherently tied into a contract. I mean, there's a reason we discuss them so much. It's who you can add to help you. And there's a reason like the Knicks have arguably the deepest team in basketball, and it's because Brunson and Randle are making what they're making. And I understand you hit a point down the road where inevitably like Brunson is going to get the Jalen Brown contract, but for now he doesn't have it. So you have to take that into account. And then I just look at, I mean, we can go back to this, like just some of the other guys who are ahead of him, and the lack of similar playoff resume, not for all of them, but for some of them. I mean, Zion, as we noted, just non-existent at this point. I only put possibly should be ahead because he's an MVP candidate, potentially if he's healthy and he's added to his game at all. Drew Holiday, I just have so much respect for him. I added him in possibly, but at this point, like next year is year, 17-ish, 16 for him, age 33 season. I don't really see him, even with everything he brings defensively, being better than Brunson. Trey, like we could have that argument all day. I like Brunson more, and I think Brunson's teammates like him a lot more. Fox, we talked out. Triple J and Bam, I think are fascinating, but I guess I don't know how you watch that Miami Knicks series, and maybe I'm not giving enough value to his defense. I personally can't get to the point where Bam was the more impactful player in that series. And then we already talked about the guys who are already hurt, but all this is to say, I think there just isn't a lot of faith, Alex. Like maybe that's how we can wrap this segment up. Like, why do you think Jalen Brunson is underrated outside of New York circles? Because I don't think it's LOL Knicks. I think it is the recency of his success. And that's essentially what Seth says in his blurb about Jalen, where he says, like, I doubted him as just being in the NBA. I doubt him as being a viable playoff performer. I doubt him as being a starter. And he says, I was dead wrong about all that. But then he concludes it by saying, I still don't think any of that makes him a franchise level player. And we're talking about a guy, again, 3-game sample, but put up, I talked about last pod, like 33, 8 and 7 on sterling efficiency in 3 essentially do or die games against one of the best defenses in basketball in the second round of the playoffs. And isn't that how you define franchise star guys who step up like that? Sure, you want to see him do it again. And maybe if he does do it again, he'll be skyrocketed up to 20 next year. But to bank on some of these guys who have just never done that in their career, I think that's where I find it difficult to get there with Seth.
Not to mention it was Brunson's, last season as a whole was sort of his coming out party as like a franchise level star, or potentially, because allegedly he hasn't hit that point yet, but it was his second straight playoffs of absolutely dominating and often being the best player on the floor, despite being on the floor with many talented players. And that included with Dallas when he, put that team on his back and beat Donovan Mitchell that time in Utah, and eventually helped get the Mavs to the Western Conference Finals last year. So yeah, I don't think that his playoff resume is being appreciated enough. And it just, again, it's one of my main problems with these lists is that they could say all they want, like, oh, this is all based off data and this, that, the other. But ultimately, when you read the blurbs that they write about these guys, it's so obvious that a lot of it is arbitrary. and just based off like, well, the numbers say this, but I think this, and it's like, I do think that there is, I hate to like always bring it back to this, but I do think that there's still like this like national media thought around the Knicks that like, it's just like, oh, they're in the Knicks, so obviously this is fool's gold, and obviously that's not going to last because XYZ. No matter what, no matter if they just had this fantastic season and they made the second round of the playoffs and think they have one of the younger playoff rosters in the NBA, and 2 stars in their prime, one of whom is on the younger side by far compared to his contemporaries right now, and a large number of young players on the come up that are all like under 23, 24 years old, like you just throw all that out the window because it's the Knicks. And then I don't know. It's annoying, but it just kind of comes with the territory at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. How about we take one more break? We come back. We rant and rave. We defend. I hope he listens to this episode. We defend Julius Randle. It's going to be a wonderful new day here on Locked On Knicks. As we are back, third and final segment. Julius Randle disrespected Locked On Knicks from day one, Alex, his greatest defenders. And it continues here because we will not stand for Julius Randle disrespect on this podcast. Never have, never will. After a season where he was third team All-NBA, that means, at least by one metric, a top 15 player in the league. Julius is ranked by Seth the 62nd best player in the NBA. And Seth's argument essentially is, which I've been here for in the past, so I'm not going to go at this quite the same way I did the Brunson one, but essentially that Julius is the ultimate example in the NBA of a regular season floor raiser and a playoff ceiling limiter. And honestly, Alex, if not for the fact that he had a pretty severe ankle injury that eventually required a pretty significant surgery, I would be there with Seth. If Julius, with no qualifiers, had just had this same postseason again, I would have said, yeah, like I don't know what to make of this. I don't know what to do with this guy at this point, whether it's psychological, whether it's just because of the style of his game. He can't perform in the playoffs. Like it's not a thing. But I actually, with some time to reflect and to marinate a little bit, I actually think Julius Randle probably would have had a pretty decent playoffs if he was fully healthy. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that, and it'll be another offseason. That it has been another offseason discussing that same narrative over and over again. And Julius, hopefully, will disprove it this year. But to me, that was the part that was most unfair about this.
Yeah, and it's just like, again, it begs the question of how is this being judged? You know what I mean? Like when you look at, if it's like, okay, Julius is a regular season only player that is not good enough in the playoffs or whatever, fine. If you want to make that argument, okay, but then how do you explain certain guys being ahead of him who objectively are worse regular season performers and equal or the same in the playoffs? You know what I mean? Like CJ McCollum is tier 4A, a solid 15 spots ahead of where Julius is. And it's like, okay, what has CJ McCollum accomplished in the playoffs? Is he not basically just a regular season's stat man? Brandon Ingram, same question. Domantas Sabonis, same question. Let's see here. Robert Williams, I mean, he's been on some really good teams. Would you really say that he was that huge of a part of why those teams got as far as they did to justify him being that much higher up?
He's never been healthy in the playoffs, so no,
right.
You can't.
So who's to say? Darius Garland, real question. He was not great in the playoffs this year. So is he not just a regular season player? I mean, you look at like Aaron Gordon, who is, I mean, all due respect to Aaron Gordon, he's a really good player, but was just a role player on the champions this year. And that's all he is. He's not expected to be anything more than that, and that's fine. But I don't see where that ranks him higher than that. Derek White, my God, like what? And then you even look at like, okay, Paolo Banchero is ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spots higher. And to that, I say, like, does he not basically produce the exact same amount in the regular season like that Julius Randle did? And I understand you expect him to get better because he was a rookie this year and he was just the rookie of the year and everything else. But Like, we're talking about a guy that again was voted a top 15 player by the media this year. Like, so this is not even just like a thing of like, oh, the players are just taking care of their own or whatever and taking care of Julius. Like, he was pretty emphatically voted one of the 15 best players in the NBA this year. And, you know, if anything, like just based off those merits, he has almost even like a leg up on Brunson in that regard, in that he's been voted that twice in the last 3 seasons, with one obviously not great season in the middle. But I don't know. I just think again, it just comes down to like this criteria is conveniently Knicks skewed or Julius skewed or whatever when you want to like push someone down a list like this, but then you just sort of ignore that criteria that pushed a certain guy down when you prop another guy up that you decide that is, you know, better for whatever reason.
Yeah, out of the guys you listed, the only one I disagree on is Brandon Ingram, because he did have that one really great series against the Suns, and I'm a big fan of his as a player. But I just look at some of the other names ahead of him. And Jared Allen, like he definitively did not have a substantially better postseason than Julius Randle. He got clowned. The lights were too bright, Alex. They were too bright for Jared Allen. Fred VanVleet, like he's an efficiency nightmare in the regular season and in the playoffs. So he's a fantastic defender for a point guard, especially one of his size. Won a championship, you give him credit there. I don't see him being in the same universe as Julius Randle in terms of regular season impact. Miles Turner, has he made the playoffs? Like, I don't really remember what had happened. Cat, we talked about it before. Yeah, I would take Randle over Cat, especially Cat makes twice as much money. I do find that the Derek White and Aaron Gordon arguments are interesting. Like, do you take elite role players on great teams over someone like Randle, who was an integral part of a really good team and then did not bring that to the playoffs? I'm kind of here for that argument, more so for Aaron Gordon than for Derek White. I don't think Derek White, again, offensively, just has like there has to be some weight given to your responsibility on the court. And Randle has to do so much more. And I think the argument that Seth makes and others make is, could Randle fit into that role like of an Aaron Gordon if he was on a super team like Denver? And honestly, I don't know if he defensively, he wouldn't be in the same universe as Gordon. Offensively, I think Denver is a better team with Julius Randle than they are with Aaron Gordon. I don't think it's necessarily that close. I think Randle would have to change a lot, but I still think we've talked about this in the past, Alex, but if you unleashed Randle with a floor spacing 5, he would go from relatively inefficient, the power forward position, to, I think, one of the more efficient players in the NBA. So context is so important. And I just don't know if there's quite enough weight being given to it here.
Yeah. Again, I think context comes up when it's convenient on lists like this.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of phrasing it. Yeah, it's collective.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you know, it's if you want to provide context, you can. If you don't, you could just say, well, the numbers just say this, and that's why.
Yeah.
And then if you want to push somebody down a list, you can say, well, but look at their playoff production, or look at what they make, or look at this or the other. Even if it's not your stated, you know, in your mission statement that, you know, that's what you're going to consider, it still comes up when ranking these guys. I feel like that's just kind of the case with Julius. And look, it's not a thing exclusive to these player ranking lists. I think that, you know, even Knicks fans sort of underappreciate the sheer amount of stuff that he's done over the last couple of years with this team.
We underappreciate
we have. Yeah. You know, we have, certainly. I think that we grew to appreciate it more as this year went on, and certainly did by the end of 20 to 21. But, you know, it took us a long time to get back to that point each of those 2 years because of the stinker of a season that preceded each of them. You know, that it took us a long time to even come around on that, and even took us weeks after the playoffs to be like, oh, maybe he actually really was just this hurt, and this wasn't just him like crapping the bed. You know, so it's just a persistent problem. Just like the persistent problem of overlooking Emmanuel Quickley, which we will get to in our next show, because there's still plenty more to talk about with the Knicks young players. So we're going to talk about Emmanuel Quickley's egregiously low ranking. Quentin Grimes and RJ Barrett right next to one another on the list. But maybe we feel one way about one and one about the other as far as where they're ranked. So we'll talk through all that as well. That's all coming up on the next edition of Locked On Knicks tomorrow, where we continue roasting these stupid rankings. Can't wait till the ESPN ones come out too. But we'll finish off the Athletic roast tomorrow. But till next time, thank you all for listening. Talk to y'all soon. Peace out, everybody.